Alright, now we should be good to go. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Top Terran tutorial tip video. This will be a TVT guide. If you're looking for something along the lines of a build order, this is going to start very normally with a Reaper, expand. For those of you unfamiliar, it's going to be 14 supply depot, 16 barracks, 16 gas, with an SCV scout as soon as your barracks and gas are started. So I took this game from a ladder game that I played against a Terran player named Dutch Treat. And for the purposes of giving you guys, a proper view of the game, I'm just going to set the vision to myself so that we don't have to see the other players' things. We want to try to take things as they go. So like I said, 14 depot, at your wall. Your first rallied SCV builds that. You guys have watched my guides before. Barracks as soon as that depot is done with that same SCV, and then immediately your gas, followed up with the SCV moving out. So for the purposes of this tutorial, we're going to also talk a lot a bit about Terran versus Terran strategy. We don't need the music that's just going to distract you from my beautiful voice. So Terran versus Terran is, of course, a pretty difficult matchup. A lot of people have their reservations about, tank drops, Reapers, and what have you. If you're scouting early on in Terran versus Terran, there's a couple of things you really need to look out for. The most important one is your opponent's barracks. In this game, I see my opponent's barracks very quickly. Because I see a barracks here, I know that the cheesiest build he could be doing is a 3-Rax Reaper inside of his own main base. And maybe if he wants to be aggressive, a 2-Rax Reaper with a second barracks hidden in here, or maybe here. But that's a little bit less common of a build. So naturally my SCV will go to the natural expansion. I want to know, is my opponent expanding? Now, with this build, once you finish your barracks, you're going to start a Reaper. Like I said, very standard Reaper expand, and transform your command center into an orbital command. If you want specific build order notes on what supply to do what, I will have that in the comment section of the video below. When that barracks is done, you send an SCV to your natural. My opponent had an SCV here to engage in fisticuffs to the death with mine, so I sent another SCV just to make sure. So I'm trying to get my expansion up. As you can see, I've got the money for it. Boom, command center on the way. My opponent, I'm kind of blocking his command center because I'm a jerk, but eventually my SCV does leave. He pulls another one. That's why I pulled the second SCV, by the way. And he starts his command center. So seeing that my opponent has expanded at this stage in Terran versus Terran, let's look at it logically. I've expanded right after I started my Reaper. My opponent has expanded after probably starting a Reaper. It might be a Marine, but for him to build the command center this early on, he doesn't have anything else on the map. So because we saw a command center this early, we know our opponent is not cheesing us. We know that they cannot be proxying us if they have a barracks at home. They cannot be proxying us if there's a barracks at home and a command center on the way this early in the game. So keep that in mind. We're about 2 minutes into the game. So if you see that, don't worry. Now, I like to be extra safe. I like to keep my Reaper at home. With this build order, we start the factory as soon as we have 100 gas. So we're going to build a single Marine. We're going to get a second supply depot after the Reaper is done to finish off our main base wall. And when the natural finishes, we're going to build another orbital command, just transforming the command center. That does complete. So looking at the rest of my base layout, for this build, this is a very good passive Terran versus Terran opening. After the Marine, we move the barracks towards the factory, and we start a reactor. But no second gas yet. I like this build because it gives you an advantage versus the majority of players that are going to play a straight-up game. In this game, my opponent plays very greedy, so we get away with it. It's not necessarily the best or the worst way to play, but it's still a solid opening, and we get a third command center as soon as we have the money for it, usually when the factory is about to finish, because we didn't get that second gas. Because we don't have SCVs allocated to mining this, those 3 SCVs that would either have had to build this and then mine from it can now just go back to mining minerals in my main base. This gives me more money. This allows me to go for 3 command centers, because if you are not at the High Master, Grandmaster League level, you probably don't like being crazy aggressive. So if you want to get good at macroing, this is a phenomenal build for that. When you're going to build a tech lab on the factory as soon as it's done. We're going to start a starport as soon as you have the gas for that. And you can kind of see how everything's just flowing here, right? Our third CC is on the way. The Reaper and this Marine are watching if your opponent sends their Reaper towards your base. My opponent is equally worried and has his Reaper back in his base. So there's really not too much to worry about And the Starport is going to be finished. We're going to go for a fast Viking. The factory doesn't really do much, mostly because we didn't scout anything aggressive. If you scout something aggressive, you can delay the Starport, get your siege tank out, cover the front. If you are getting Reaper cheese or anything like that, the first Marine and Reaper should be enough to buy you a little bit of time with some SCVs that get pulled for you to get your siege tank out, and that will shut down all forms of Reaper aggression. Anything else to really look at here? When we have 16 SCVs in our main and both gas is saturated, we're going to rally over to the natural. And I'm going to speed through this a little bit. As you feel comfortable, you want to add 2 barracks, get your siege tanks, and depending on what you've scouted, feel free to scan, by the way, at any point in time. I scan right here. And we look at, okay, Nate, what do you see and what does this really tell you? Well, I see my opponent has a tech lab, 2 barracks, but this tech lab is already spinning. So I know he's already getting stim, which is pretty fast for the purposes of this game, but I see his engineering base just finishing. I don't see a starport. He doesn't have one. I don't think he can have one because it takes so much gas to build a reactor. It takes minerals to build this. If he's building a tank, there is absolutely no way, or a cyclone, there's absolutely no way he can also be getting a starport that he could use to try and send banshees or anything like that over to me. The 3rd command center also tells me he's not going to be aggressive. He doesn't have an army out on the map. So I don't need to worry about my opponent attacking me in this game. I'm going to send the Reaper in anyway just to see what's going on. Doesn't really do anything. But I've got my tank back home. The Viking is going to look for drops. And in this game, to punish my opponent going 3 command center, I go double eBay, but it's not that big of a deal. The most important thing about TVT, if you want to be able to shut down aggressive play, normally what I would do is put the starport on this reactor and start pumping out a lot of Vikings. If you have air superiority and siege tanks, it's almost impossible to break you in TVT. But in this particular game, I'm just going to go for the standard Terran setup that every Terran wants. So take notes. If you're set up like this on 2 bases with a 3rd command center, an engineering base rolling with upgrades, and you're getting stim, you want to go up to 3 barracks, 1 starport, 1 factory, pumping out tanks, keeping a tank in the front and a tank in the main. The tank is in your main base in case your opponent tries to mine drop you. What if all of a sudden, boom, we have 6 Marines starting to unload? Well, that tank is just going to start pot-shotting those Marines because medevacs can't heal while they're unloading. What if he tries to drop your natural? Well, we've got a Viking here that can push the medevac away or give us a heads-up notice so that we can move our Marines and maybe one of our tanks over to try and defend. So this is, bar none, the safest way to set yourself up on 2 bases. One of the. It's possible your opponent pushes you in the front, so the tank is here, with your depots giving some vision for their range. It's possible to go Banshee. I scanned, I didn't see a starport, I didn't see anything to suggest Banshee, so I didn't build any missile turrets. But you can build turrets if you're not, if you're not 100% sure, if you're worried about being attacked. And once you have these barracks done, you're going to go straight up to more reactors. I throw another scan. I'm going to say, okay, Nate, why did you scan now? Well, I scanned now because if my opponent's not going to attack me, I want to take my 3rd base. I don't have stim, but I want my 3rd base. So I need to know what he has in order to determine whether it's possible for me to do it without dying to some sort of aggressive play. I see that he's adding on a 4th and 5th barracks, and lo and behold, no more 3rd command center. He took his 3rd base. So already, obviously this isn't ideal, but my opponent was in a very unique position to be playing greedier than me. I'm a pretty greedy guy, but this is a good build for those of you who don't want to constantly be attacking, who just want to build up an army and focus on your macro. This is a good build for trying to improve your ability to just max out quickly, get better at building supply depots and SCVs, because you shouldn't be focused too much on getting aggressive. Didn't even notice he didn't fully saturate that gas, but beside the point. So I know, okay, I can take my 3rd base pretty easily. I should be totally fine to just float my 3rd over, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. At the same time, I'm also going to add on more barracks because I saw he was. I know he's not attacking me. So as you take your 3rd base, you want to be on 5 barracks, 1 starport with a reactor, and 1 factory with a tech lab, with upgrades going as well. Don't forget that. Get your stim, get your combat shield, get your upgrades, your 1-1. I'm going to get an armory shortly so that I can get my 2-2 quickly as well. And never ever unsiege your tanks once you get them. Move them around like chess pieces with your medevacs to cover the front. And there's a couple of reasons why I'm going to position some of my units the way that I do. A sensor tower here is going to stop you from getting flanked by tanks, and it will also help cover some of the drop distance that your opponent could go to hit the pocket of your main base or the bottom side of your expansion. This area, for any of you guys who play ladder, I'm sure you know about this. This is a very popular target for siege tank pushes, this area as well. Sensor tower will give us advance notice. If you see a red dot here, you take both your medevacs, you pick up your tanks, and you boost over and drop right here. That will keep everything here away, and you rally out here so that you can stop a possible front counter. I put another sensor tower here for the same reason. This position in particular is a very, very good spot to attack in TVT. So it's very difficult to defend this position if your opponent gets there. So don't let them get there, you know. It's a bad thing to do. So then we start to saturate our third base. We're going to take our gases. Why do we take the gases on the third immediately? Because we want to get our armory and get our 2-2. We want to get +1 on our siege tanks. For those of you guys that don't know, when in siege mode, tanks take 4 shots to kill each other. If you have +1 attack, that becomes 3 shots. It's never 2 shots. Always, always just 3 shots. Once you have +1, if you have +2, then armor upgrades don't matter either for siege tanks. So I'm going to get my 4th command center because I don't want to get super aggressive just yet. But the ideal follow-up here is as you start to saturate, when you're at about 10 workers on that third base, and of course always constantly be building SCVs, you want to start your 4th command center. You can also add on 3 barracks and another factory, but I'm going to do that after. So there's my 3 racks now on the way. I get a second factory going soon too, so that I can pump out 2 tanks at a time. This is very important. But as you can see, I have a very simple layout. So now, for the next step, we are on 3 bases. Your ideal production setup is 2 factories. My second factory is about to start. 9 barracks, or excuse me, 8 barracks. I can't count, but it's 8 barracks, 1 with a tech lab. The rest all have reactors. If you're like, Nate, why would you want to keep a barracks with a tech lab on it? Honestly, you never know when mixing a marauder in could help, but also being able to get a ghost or something like that if you really want to. So now we're just building up. I built this bunker. It's not really necessary. I wasn't sure if my opponent was going to attack me. In this game, I kind of knew that he had stim before I did. So another great move to make in Terran versus Terran is to send out a few Marines to each corner of the map. You know, just look around. I mean, this guy, I missed him, but I cleaned up a Marine over here. I did just kill 1. You just want your Marines to run around, look for any forces out on the map, but check for expand. So I know this is a normal 4th base. I'm going to send Marines over here. And I'm like, okay, I don't see a 4th. Obviously, I miss it this game, but you kind of get the idea that I was looking for it, and it wasn't there yet. I'm going to check the corners of the map, because in case you had a ninja or something weird going on, I'm like, okay, I'm going to check here, another natural 4th base area. These guys are going to patrol. The reason why these guys patrolling is important is if my opponent wants to attack me on the left side of the map, my sensor towers are nice, but these guys are going to tell me as soon as he leaves. He can't really move an army through here without one of these Marines seeing him. And same thing over here. Like, these Marines that are patrolling should spot pretty much anything that comes by. Same thing with these Marines. So my opponent's going to move in to attack me. And, okay, for this game, he snipes my 4th command center. Not good. Really bad. Really bad. But my upgrades are better than his. I'm going to take a fight. And 1-1 versus 2-2 Marines generally favors the guy that's got 2-2, but my tanks, honestly, I just dropped them just a little bit too far away. So I'll just let you guys watch this battle because I lose it pretty badly. It's important to try to spread your Marines out to minimize splash damage from the tanks. You can see that I still killed all of his Marines because I had better upgrades, but that fight could have gone a lot better. And he's going to continue to try to pressure me, but it's important to get everything that you need to get that +1. He's getting it now. I've already got it. But I need to start my 3-3. And when you're in a situation like this, never be afraid to try to hit your opponent from multiple angles. Remember that if you can get your tanks planted down, all of these tanks in this position are clumped up. Splash damage is really, really good against these forces. So you can see, in this situation, I notice he doesn't have many Marines. So I'm just going to drop on top of the tanks because I know his Marine count is low. I know my Marines are better upgraded than his. So these guys drop down. They buy me a bit of time. I move in this tank, and I do everything that I can to push my opponent away from me. But at the same time, if you're going to move forces and you want to keep them spread, like I said, he unsieges his tanks. Eventually, I do push this back. This wasn't the greatest plate engagement by me, But I mean, I'm making this tutorial off one of my ladder games. Crazy stuff happens in ladder games. This isn't some sort of weird game. No actors here. No one was paid to make the game close, or anything like that. So 3-3 upgrades. Always be upgrading. There are very few situations where you are going to lose a game when you have an upgrade advantage and fight with an even amount. So let's see what exactly we do next. So the best way to control an army of Marine tank medevac, in my opinion, and I'll show you this. I think we can show it on the, there we go. So you can see here, these are my control groups. Control group 1 is everything. That includes my medevacs, that includes my Viking. Control group 2 is always going to be just the medevacs. And the reason why I do this is so I can go for an attack, and then stim, and then press 2, and then D, and then click somewhere. And all my tanks are going to drop on that spot. And you're about to see that happen right here. So just keep a close eye. I stim, I move forward with my Marines. I pull back. I'm not ready to take this fight yet. And I basically just press 2, D on the top side. My Marines are all spread along the bottom. And I just kind of take this fight. Some of his tanks aren't in range. It's also very important to note that. It makes it a lot easier. Notice his tanks in the back, excuse me, can't actually hit my Marines. So I got a better position here. My Marines are spread out. His are very clumped. It's always important to try to spread your Marines as much as possible. So I get this fight that goes pretty well into my favor. We trade out a lot of Marines, but my tanks are actually able to fight. I'm able to counter push up here by picking off some of his tanks with my medevacs, dropping Marines onto them, and then I secure my 4th base. So if you're wondering, Nate, when can I take my 4th base? Honestly, whenever you feel comfortable. If your opponent is playing just 3 base, feel free to just chill. Feel free to just chill, take your 4th a little bit slower. But if you feel comfortable in your micro, the best way to engage is pretty much like how I just did it. You want your Marines spread out, you drop your tanks behind one flank, ideally outside the range of your opponent's tanks, but also in a position where they can shoot the Marines without being bum rushed. So, yeah, that's pretty much the best way to engage, in my personal opinion. Of course, if you watch pro gamers, they're really good. It's a waste of time to try copying them because honestly, you've got bigger issues to deal with than trying to go for 500 APM spreads. So I scam. I see most of his army positioning. I want to attack. This is an orbital. It's not very safe. So I continue to move forward. And for positioning, this gets pretty tricky. I want to drop all my tanks in one bunch because only half of his tanks are here. And I go for this big play. I attack when my 3-3 is done. My opponent, he only has 2-2. So always fight if you have an upgrade advantage. You'll always trade better. Even though I can't break him because of his siege tanks, I can still deny a gas. I can still harass. And also, behind this sort of pressure, if you're wondering, Nate, how do I stop those weird base trades from happening? Personally, I think you leave a tank in your natural, leave a tank in your 3rd, and then I like seeing as well, you know, just a siege tank out here. I love putting these by the planetaries, because planetaries, you're not going to break them with just Marines. You're not going to break them with just Marines. You need tanks. And he goes for that counter. He goes for that awkward, weird situation causer where he tries to make this attack. And you can see the success of this. You know, you just have the tanks here. He can't really drop because your tank will shoot first. There's a 2-second delay when you get dropped out of a tank. And yeah, I got 2 tanks here. So I'm just trying to cover all my bases. Now, he could have gone for a Doom drop at any point in time. But, you know, Terran versus Terran's a tough matchup. So I'm constantly sending Marines out. I'm looking for expansions. As you can see, I just got a bunch of worker kills almost for free. I'm going to have to trade this army out. This army gets stuck. So I'm like, whatever. Nothing I could really do there. And, I mean, for all intents and purposes, there's not really much else I have to say to you guys about the tutorial. So just going through a little bit more of TVT in general. At this point, I've finally managed to get maxed out, or at least very close to being maxed. I lift as many tanks as I can at one time, and I'm just going to have to let this pass. Somebody picked an unfortunate time to do that. My bad. Sorry. Should have had that off. Sorry about that. So my opponent wants to make a big play on me now. He wants to attack me. But I've kind of denied one of his expansions in the northwest. He's going to keep spreading himself out. And the best thing that you can do in this situation is try to catch them off guard. So I'm going to pretty much stop the video here with this engagement. As you can see, I catch him in a spot where he's stuck. So he's moving out. His tanks are in the air. And I have my tanks up front, so I recognize an opportunity to go for a fight because my Marines are close to his tanks. His Marines are not close to mine. So you kind of see the way that his army's spread out. Most of his tanks are unsieged, which aren't going to do much. All of his tanks are looking at this Marine. And all of his medevacs and tanks are still here. So my tanks have landed first. And what I like to do is, of course, you got to try to spread out as much as possible. He's also pretty spread out here as well. Turn the sound off because this is pretty loud. But you see, you kind of spread your Marines in a way that the splash won't hit all of them. It's obviously very hard to do during a fight. But I focused on his tanks in this fight because I'm able to catch him off guard. And with that, I secure basically the game-winning fight. My opponent GG's pretty quickly after this. There's not really much else in this game. But taking the spreads, jumping your opponent when possible, that's the most important thing you can do, and that's TVT. Hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial video, this guide, what have you. Pretty much because I know some of you have asked me to expand past just the beginning when I only talk about the opener. So this time I talked about more than the opener. I went over TVT in general. If you prefer a tutorial in this format, please let me know in the comments section. Yeah, this is a bit longer, but people usually ask why I don't show past the beginning stage when I'm doing these videos. So I'll see you guys next time. Please let me know what you feel. And of course, I recorded this live on Twitch TV. Big shout out to all my subscribers that support me and make me doing StarCraft full-time a reality. Check me out on twitch.tv/Nathanias. Love y'all. Bye-bye.